Welcome everybody. We're one member short at the moment. We gather that there's a problem with parking, so shouldn't be here any time soon. Just before we go into the agenda, the final item today, item 11, I'll be stepping out of the chair for the simple reason that I do know the applicant, and it's in my ward as well, so you'll have to decide who you want to be chair. Carol Pattison. Yeah, right. I'm going to say don't be.
So have we got a seconder to that proposal?
Carol, just to chair last item, item 11.
No,
yeah. Right. Okay. Next, membership committee is as printed today and will be when Carol gets here. Minutes of the previous meeting, can I pass those as a correct record? Thank you. Item 3, declarations of interest and lobbying. I'll start with Councillor Sokol.
None, Chair.
Councillor Thompson. None,
Chair.
Councillor Pinnett.
None, Chair.
Councillor Bellamy.
None, Chair.
Councillor Graves.
None, Chair.
And I've just been lobbied on the item 11. No action taken. This is a public meeting with live on YouTube. Apparently there's thousands watching this afternoon. So I've just been told. Item 5, deputations and petitions.
None received, Chair.
Go. We took 2 site visits in this morning. First one was up at Sellandine Nook at the Huddersfield YMCA. Second site visit, Smithies Lane, Eppmanwyke. So now on to the nitty-gritty. First item, this is Birstall Retail Park up at Junction 27. David, you taking it?
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. I'm David Wordsworth, Case Officer for this application and Major Minerals Team Leader with the Council. Agenda item 9 is full planning permission which is sought for the erection of a retail associated development with parking, servicing and landscaping. The site is at Landoff Bankwood Way, Birstall Retail Park at Batley. The site is adjacent to the junction 27 of the M62. The site is within a priority employment area within the local plan. It's 1.53 hectares in size. The site was formerly contained offices which have now been demolished. An existing office, which is Paradigm House, abuts the northern boundary and commercial buildings to the southwest of the boundary, or they were at some point. The majority of the site is bound by Bankwood Way and Woodhead Road. The existing point of access is off Bankwood Way, which is shared with Paradigm House. The slides you can see before you show the red line application boundary and also the highlighted area on the bottom right. That is the allocation of the priority employment area. So in terms of the proposal, full planning permission is sought. 2 separate retail units are proposed. One is at Lidl supermarket with a net sales area of 1,414 square metres and is proposed to the south of the site. The Home Bargains is proposed to the northwest of the site with a net sales area of 2,114 square metres. Vehicular access to the development is proposed from 2 separate points: Woodhead Road to the northwest via a new priority control junction, and also through the existing site access of Bankwood Way to the northeast. The development has been projected to generate 110 part-time and full-time jobs, which are 75 full-time equivalents, with 174 car parking spaces. In terms of principle of development, retail development of the site has already been established. This is because an outline planning permission for 4 units was approved in January 2020 for a much larger retail floor space. That permission is still extant. The proposed retail development is an employment generating use as defined in the local plan, and it is accepted as being appropriate for a priority employment area. In addition, this is a brownfield site and therefore involves the recycling of previously developed land. The principle of development is therefore in accordance with LP 8, and the principle is accepted. However, specific retail impacts must also be considered, and in terms of retail is classified as a main town centre use, and given the amount of new retail floor space being proposed and the site being situated in an out of centre location, the applicant was required to undertake a sequential test and retail impact assessment, which have been independently assessed by Nexus Planning on behalf of the local planning authority, the findings of which are summarised below. In terms of the sequential assessment, the applicant's sequential search focused around Batley Town Centre and Birstall District Centre in Kirklees and Morley Town Centre in Leeds. Nexus was satisfied with this approach as no other centres offer genuine potential to serve a similar catchment area in a similar manner. Nexus do not believe that any one is both available and suitable to accommodate the application proposal. Nexus concluded that the proposal confirms with requirements of the sequential test as stated in Policy LP 13 of the local plan and the MPPF. Now, in terms of retail impact assessment, two key impact tests are identified in the MPPF as being the impact upon committed and planned public and private sector investment in a centre, and the impact on town centre vitality and viability, including local consumer choice and trade in the town centre and wider retail catchment. The applicant submitted an updated impact assessment in December 2021. Nexus assessed this and concluded that there is not any town centre investment which would likely be prejudiced as a consequence of the application proposal. Nexus do not consider that the resultant impacts on the overall vitality and viability of the defined centres would be at a level which would be considered to be significantly adverse. Conditions are proposed to restrict the net sales area of the proposed units in respect of convenience and comparison goods. In terms of benefits of the scheme, these should be acknowledged. One would be improved local customer choice, and secondly, promote linked trips to other nearby outlets as well. In terms of highways, I won't go into much detail here, but National Highways, formerly Highways England, have been consulted and raised no objections. The previous application secured a financial contribution towards a suite of pedestrian improvements within the vicinity of the site to improve connectivity and adjacent premises. The slide you can now see is the pedestrianisation scheme that is sought to be considered as part of this application. So the previous application secured a financial contribution towards a suite of measures. The contribution amounted to £97,000 and included new pedestrian crossing points, upgrading of existing crossing points and new and upgraded pedestrian traffic islands across the retail park. Officers considered that improving pedestrian connectivity were best served by a new pedestrian light control crossing across Gelded Road between Woodhead Road and the roundabout junction and the Highwood Road junction. The applicant has proposed a contribution of £160,000 towards pedestrian improvements. This is intended to deliver the light control crossing on Gelded Road and a set of pedestrian improvements within the immediate vicinity of the site. The new signalised crossing is shown in orange, if members can make that out on the plan. In terms of other matters, the site is within the middle of an outer zone of Coma site, control of major accident hazards, with the majority of the site being in the middle zone. The Health and Safety Executive have been consulted and do not advise against granting of planning permission. I just bring to members' attention the amended recommendation in the agenda update, and committee to note that the officer recommendation does not is so and the application does not have to be referred to the Secretary of State. If committee supported officer recommendation, you would delegate authority to officers to finalise the wording of the conditions and the Section 106 agreement. Thank you, Chair.
Right, we've two speakers. First one, Councillor Smage.
Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking regarding my concerns about highway issues in the area. As you'll see from the report, I have asked for a coordinated approach to highways from junction 27 through to Birstall Smithies. At the moment, we experience queues of traffic down the A62 at any time of day, and if the motorway is busy or blocked, then the queues become longer. This affects the state roads as well, as vehicles try to find a way around the queues, and also affects the centre of Birstall and access to the shops there. There should be a plan that developments can work to for this area, yet Kirklees have stated that this is not a priority and they do not have resources, which is, I think the diplomatic word would be, surprising considering the amount of businesses there are. The problem is that applications such as this only look at part of the road network that directly links to their proposal. In the traffic assessment for this application, I've not found anything that relates to impacts of traffic from the motorway or the wider impact beyond the junction improvements been made for the application. The information about queues of traffic is also not recognisable. Clearly, the computer modelling does not account for when people are leaving the showcase cinema after the end of a film, as the queue lengths are longer than stated. I would also ask if an assessment has been carried out of the different traffic flows at different times of the year. Christmas is a particularly busy period for that area, with traffic increases across the whole of the site. I would also like to know how they identified the peak times of 1 hour on a Friday and 1 hour on a Saturday. This does not fit at all with local knowledge. On the same side of the retail area at Junction 27, we've had several approved planning applications for changes to make drive-throughs for food businesses. Yet the cumulative impact of these drive-throughs on the same roads do not appear to have been factored into this traffic assessment. Whilst I appreciate there are changes to 2 access junctions and greater pedestrian access as part of the application, the MPPF talks about cumulative effects. Therefore, there does need to be a traffic assessment that provides information that fits with what is happening for a wider period of time than 2 hours, and takes into consideration the drive-through changes as well as the impact that motorway traffic has, especially when the motorway is blocked and the traffic comes to a standstill. The mitigation for the traffic in this application adds to concerns rather than lessens them. It is in everyone's interest for the traffic to flow easily along this road. Thank you.
Next speaker is Chris Darley.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Chris Darley from Lichfields and I act as planning agent to Lidl, the applicant. Firstly, we welcome the recommendation of the officers to approve the application. It is made following a positive period of discussions between Lidl and the council at both pre-application stage and during the determination of the application. It is important to recognise that this recommendation has been made in light of there being no outstanding objections from any statutory or technical consultee, and that includes from your Highways Department and Highways England, so National Highways, should I say. The proposal is fully compliant with planning policy, and there are no material considerations which would warrant refusal of the application. The proposals represent redevelopment of a brownfield site and is located in an established retail and leisure destination. The designation of the site in the Kirklees local plan is permissive of retail uses where certain criteria are met. And the officer's report confirms that those criteria are met in this case. There is an extant outline permission for 4 retail units on the site which approve the principle of retail development and the means of access into the site. That permission is for a much greater amount of floor space than is proposed by the new application. You'll be aware that the application has been subject to an objection from Tesco, which has delayed the determination of the application. Since it was deferred at committee in November, we have worked thoroughly to rebut the points made by Tesco and have demonstrated that all their concerns are unfounded. Importantly, the Council's independent advisors, Nexus Planning, as you heard from Mr Wordsworth, and indeed your officers themselves have agreed with us and conclude that the proposals are entirely acceptable in retail policy terms. The scheme before you will deliver a number of important benefits. These include a £160,000 financial contribution towards pedestrian accessibility in the area, which goes well beyond the previous application and includes a new signalised crossing across Gelder Road. It will create 75 full-time equivalent jobs within the stores, as well as further jobs in the supply chain and construction jobs. It will deliver a 10% net gain in biodiversity, secured through new landscaping on site and a financial contribution towards off-site enhancements. It will be highly energy efficient, and the little store will incorporate solar panels meeting 25% of its energy requirements. It will also enhance customer choice to shoppers in the area. So we therefore support the recommendation and urge you to approve the application today. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them, and I'm also joined by Lidl's Highways engineer, who will be happy to address any questions you have or indeed respond to any of the points that's been raised by Councillor Smage. Thank you.
Just before, Carol, while you are fighting your way into a car parking space, I've got to ask you, have you got any, have you been approached by anybody?
Only an email from the applicant for the last application today, and it's on his behalf because he's not able to be here.
No action taken?
But no action taken.
Right, that's it. Thank you. Right. Members, or Chris, I don't know whether you want to come in at this point and about traffic issues.
Well, I can either come in at this point or I can wait till what members have to say, whichever members prefer.
Right. Right, members. Over to you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. Would it be possible to put the diagram of the road system with the new pedestrian lights, please?
Just bear with a minute, Councillor, I'll just try and launch it again. Thank you.
Okay. I've got to say that I probably spend half my life up in Bristol Junction 27. My wife works up there, and the pick up and drop off isn't easy, to say the best. But my observations are this from somebody that lives nearby and uses that area on a very regular basis. One is that, I'll just wait for the there we go. So I've got a couple of points as far as road safety is concerned. One is the roundabout itself. Gelder Road roundabout is probably one of the busiest roundabouts that you could come across in Kirklees. It is a continual flow of traffic from early morning to late evening, and because there's a nighttime economy up there as well, it really doesn't slacken off, doesn't the volume of traffic. My humble opinion is putting drop curbs anywhere near that roundabout, I would say, causes a major problem, especially going from the south side of the complex to the north. The other thing is that the existing pedestrian lights to the north there, nearer to Junction 27, only get used by people getting off the bus there. because there's no immediate access into the north side of the complex. So therefore, they start using it as a rat run through home bases car park. So that is one, and then the nip through the bushes from the Starbucks side. So it's not an obvious flow as far as pedestrians are concerned. The one to the south of it, the existing lights there, rarely, if ever, get used by pedestrians because it's too far away from the footfall of pedestrians going up there. So putting another pedestrian crossing in almost seems perverse to me, that anybody would use something that's nearer to the roundabout. My obvious conclusion is overhead footway, because it's the only safe way to get from north to south, and it's the only way to keep the traffic flowing on Gelderd Road at any moment in time during the day there that's busy, like I said earlier, from morning, noon and night. Doesn't make any sense to risk pedestrians going over that roundabout, and it doesn't make any sense putting another pedestrian crossing in that doesn't get used anyway. So my thought process around it is, until we've done any sort of logical highways assessment on that stretch of road at different times of day and different days of the week, then any conclusion that's been made there is wholly inaccurate, because people aren't doing the assessments at the right times of day. It is a dangerous roundabout, umpteen accidents on that roundabout. People have got restricted view left and right for the drop curbs to be any sense whatsoever as far as road safety is concerned. So even though I have got no objection to the planning of either of the buildings, I have got an objection to that road survey being an accurate measure of what actually goes on there on a day-to-day basis. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Mark. Mohan.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I've gone through this report very carefully. I think this is a business, Mr. Chair, business investment in Kirklees, which Kirklees Council badly needed that. Yeah. The site is, I think, is in a priority employment area where there's no question we can't have this type of a business in that site. And the blocks of offices have been demolished about 6-7 years ago, and the site looking like a derelict, which is very suitable for this type of business. I understand what Mark has said about traffic or pedestrian improvement work. The Section 106 contribution which have been offered by the applicant, I think I've never seen such a business. I think 160,000 good enough to improve all round the traffic or pedestrian improvement, including signalized crossing on Gelderd Road. But I'm not, officer might explain to Mark then what they have taken into account, all this, they are going to improve it, yeah. They are creating 174 car parks in there for both business and little and what they call the other one, yeah. And more beneficial to the community or in Kirklees is employment, 110 jobs, including part-time and full-time. I welcome that, yeah. Mr. Chair, I understand Mark as a local councillor, he have some concern about that, which I think the officer will take into account or will explain here. But I don't think if we can we can afford to lose this type of business in Kirklees. If we refuse this application, they might go to Leeds or Wakefield or Bradford or other spaces. So on this basis, I'm happy with the official recommendation, but see how the members go there. Yeah, I understand Mark. Well, if the highway officer just explain to Councillor Mark Thompson, yes, yeah, then I will happy to move this. Yeah.
Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I know this site quite well, perhaps not quite so well as Councillor Thompson. However, I think I have to point out yet once again, this is an accidental retail park. It was never intended as a retail development, going way back to before the Showcase Cinema was granted permission. It was intended as an industrial site, and well, there are some industrial uses on there, but they have been overwhelmed by the retail uses, most particularly IKEA. The result of all that is that it has not been planned to deal with the fallout from that. In other words, if you have a retail park, you will expect to get people to come and buy things, don't you? And so how do you ensure that these people who come and buy things, which on the whole we think is quite a good idea, can get about the site in safety? And this, of course, includes getting across an extremely busy A road. And Councillor Thompson has already pointed out some of the issues relating to that. I have on occasions experienced that, and actually, as a pedestrian, trying to cross that road is a bit scary. I'll say no more than that. Now we have an application for two. What is the correct term? I was going to say cheap shops. Perhaps that's being a bit. Yeah, bargain stores, which to some degree don't fit with the other uses on the site. Some of which are really quite high-end retail units. Not all of them, but that is and the fact that is mentioned in the report. These are town centre uses. And I would contend that bargain stores are preeminently town centre uses, catering for people who do not have access to cars. And you see, the trouble with this site here is that it is visited very largely by people in cars. I do it myself on occasions when I go to Curry's or something like that. So what can we do about that, and what can we do about that on the back of this planning application? It might be that we could improve the bus service, which at the moment is not very good, really. There is I think it's 15-minute frequency on the bus route which goes between Huddersfield and Leeds. I don't think there are any other buses that serve that area. But I know what it says in the report about the retail impact on other centres. But this doesn't help those people without access to a car who may live in Birstall. They've either got to walk up there or catch a bus. I'm not quite sure where I'm going with this, but I do think that they're, along with Councillor Thompson, I'm not happy with the pedestrian arrangements around the whole of this site actually, but specifically the proposals that are here. And I do think that his suggestion of a bridge across the road may well be amongst the solutions that need to be considered. You see, if this was a properly planned retail centre, then we'd have got one of those. We might even have had two bridges across the road, so that pedestrians can move about the site safely. So I'm going to leave it at that. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with this one yet. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Andrew. Myself, all years it's been there, the most I've ever seen footfall in one go when a flock of sheep escaped a field in Gummersall and found their way up to Bristol. They were camped out on the roundabout. Chris, highways.
Right, thank you, Chair. Only the comments I've heard are what I expected. Actually, I think there's a few things. It is largely a car-borne development. Is Bristol Retail Park Junction 27. Like Councillor Pinnock said, it's sort of evolved over the years. It hasn't been properly planned. It's just evolved. I don't think this development, in comparison to the overall development, is a relatively small development. This is not going to solve the problems in that retail area. It would have to be some of the larger IKEA type developments. If they were coming along, they could perhaps do something meaningful. This one has to mitigate its own impact. We have to bear in mind the fallback position that we have an approval for a retail development on this site that's larger than this one in terms of area, generates similar levels of traffic, and it had a mitigation package with it. I do take the point Councillor Thompson makes about the mitigation package that's attached to the extant permission. I think it was crossing at that roundabout at those points is not going to be easy, especially when it's busy. When I go there, I go to IKEA, like everybody does. And it's a bit of a legacy of that previous application. Those crossings are already there. What those measures do is upgrade them to current standards with tactile pavement and the likes. When we re-looked at this, we felt, we did listen to some councillors' views on this, and we felt the A62 does form a barrier between the north and the south of that retail area. It's, especially to pedestrian movement, it causes a real barrier. And we felt we took a view that a formalised signalised crossing would offer the best solution. I take the point Councillor Thompson has made about the existing crossing to the north and the south. Neither of them are well used. They're probably not actually on the pedestrian design lines that people would want. I think the one that we are proposing, it ties up with the pedestrian link from the Currys. So there's the Currys and the Furniture World and that sort of Bark and Stonehouse, that sort of area. It links down from the pedestrian route to that where you would cross. Also, it links with the bus stop there, and it would get you across. It would get you across on what I think is possibly not the ideal one, but the best solution we can find on a pedestrian design line to provide that crossing. You do feel more safer crossing the A62 at that point if you're faced with a green light and you know the traffic is stopping, rather than trying to cross on an uncontrolled drop. So what we've achieved is we've gone for that as an option, and we have got a scaled down version of the other improvements on what we think are some of the design lines. They are legacy really from the previous permission. I think the real thing is this signalised crossing, and I think this one will be on more of a design line. So hopefully should be better. Would be better used. I don't think there's a few other measures. There's a few other measures with this. They're changing the priority of the Woodhead Road, Bankwood Road junction, which should help traffic flow to the development better rather than right turners backing back up to the roundabout. And also they're proposing to maybe sign traffic exiting the development to use Bankwood Road, especially if you're sort of southbound towards Bristol, you use the Bankwood Way back to Gelded Road to take pressure off of that roundabout. I think that would be, once people got to know about that and started using it, that would take some pressure off that junction for even approaching and for leaving the development. So I think we've got the best solution we can get out of the development we've got, but I don't pretend that we are solving all the problems at that, and I don't think we could solve them with a development. Well, we couldn't solve them with a development this scale. It would need to be a significant anchor destination. I mean, turning to traffic, I think it's you've got to also realise developments of this type on that type of development tend to be, that's not going to be an anchor primary destination on that retail park. It's more likely to be one where you've been to visit. A large majority of the trips will be linked with people doing something else. They will have visited one of the other stores, a bit like the M&S food on there operates now. You go visit something else, you come out and decide you need something for your tea or some milk or some bread, and you go there. It's absolutely packed. This obviously a different offer, but be used very similar. I think that, you know, the trips will be primarily, they'll be either pass-by trips. If someone's on the A64 Gelded Road, needs something, will pop in. There will be linked trips, i.e. you're on the retail park already, and you will hopefully walk across to it, but you may choose to drive. Or there will be a percentage of trips which will be transferred trips, which will be someone who uses an existing supermarket somewhere, Batley, Burstall or somewhere else, and decides to try the supermarket on here if it opens. So I think the actual the majority of the traffic associated with this development will be traffic that's already on the network and already in that area. The percentage of new traffic being drawn to that area will be relatively small. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think we all must use this. All the shops up here, this retail park, at some time or other. I mean, I actually remember studying Spring Ram for my DMS. Were they a bathroom supplier or were they a property developer? I mean, the answer, of course, was property developer. I have no idea if they're still involved. But anyway, that's why it is so badly planned, and it would have been, I suppose the road might have been completely diverted, or we would have had, not a bridge, I don't think, we would have had underpasses underneath that road if it had been properly planned. To be honest, I don't think a bridge would work for the same reason as the existing two pedestrian traffic lights don't work, because wherever it was, and you'd only get one, no one would be able to afford or find the space for two, wherever it was, it wouldn't meet most people's desire lines, and they would they would continue to use existing pedestrian crossings or try their luck or whatever, but the one thing that we do know about bridges is it takes an awful long time to walk up to them, then across them, and then it's all in bad weather, and especially if it's windy, it's even windier up there, and then you have to walk down, and no, you'd rather risk crossing the road. I mean, there isn't a lot of foot traffic there at the moment, and ideally we would like to see it more, but yes, because people, they take their cars there because there is no other way, really. If you're going to shop, you take your car to one side, and you even drive around on one side, don't you? You move from IKEA's car park to Marks and Spencer's car park, and then pop across to Lidl's car park if Lidl's is going to be there. I mean, certainly, I know personally, as much as I would like to be able to walk, I do. If I go up there at the moment and I need to get to the other side, I will take my car with me for the sake of time, if nothing else. So I do think we do need to improve the crossings for pedestrians, because we would like to encourage pedestrians to cross that road. But to be honest, I don't really know that there will be an awful lot of increased footfall, even if we did put in a bridge. I mean, I think one of the things that we're going to have to consider in the future is far more of a one-stop shopping experience for people. They will, I mean, people will take a day out up there at the moment anyway and go to various shops and go to the cinema, but they will come and shop at Lidl's and Home Bargains, and then possibly go across to IKEA or vice versa and Marks and Spencer's. I mean, I certainly would go to all of those. So I'm certainly not against the development, and I actually think that the new signalised pedestrian crossing is probably in about the right place. As you say, it comes off that Curry's car park. The only other place to put would be where there is, right on the on the roundabout. And in terms of holding up the traffic, I mean, we do have to remember that the new highway code actually says that pedestrians come first and cars second, and therefore we should be considering the needs of pedestrians rather than the needs of cars. I mean, that's my comments really on the development. I would just like to ask one question though. We've been here so many times looking at the site or different sites up there, and it certainly does need developing. It's a total waste of space if we don't, and it does look appalling. But so often we've had comments from the Health and Safety Executive saying that they advise against it. On this occasion, they don't. I realise it's far further away, or quite some way away from the site that they give us that advice about. But is there any change, excuse me, any significant change in this advice from Health and Safety Executive?
Thank you, Chair. I'll let David come back on the specific point about Health and Safety Executive, but it's just coming back on Councillor Pinnock's point about this type of retail in this location. I think as we've tried to explain, it's probably going to be a link trip where you go to IKEA and then you do your shopping on the way home. But I think it's important to recognise within the primary employment area policy, we do allow retail development. This is obviously an employment generator, so that's why. And we've been through the sequential test that it can't be located somewhere else. So I just want to clarify that point. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Chair. I haven't got the information about the previous application, but I do seem to think that the Health and Safety Executive have been consistent. I know, but on different sites in this retail park, there have been objections, but they have been in the inner zone, whereas the majority of the site is in the medium and outer zone. So that answers that point. And on a couple of other points on the back of what Chris was saying in terms of highways, I think it's important that members are aware that the differences between this scheme and the previous application. The previous application outline was a larger amount of retail floor space proposed, and the commuted sum for the pedestrian related scheme was 90,000, and that was to achieve a lot of what is achieved here, but not the signalised crossing. The signalised crossing is an additional element that is of a benefit to this scheme, notwithstanding the comments of local councillors, and they could be involved if they were to support the scheme. I would have thought in finalising what the contribution goes towards in terms of the details, if that was necessary, Chair. So that's all. The other thing I'd like to point out is that we do have the retail advisor here, Richard. If members have any questions, he could do a quick summary on the retail matters if members wanted to hear that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm comfortable with this proposal. There may be discount retailers, but they draw their customers from a wide base. I am one of them. And the issue, I suppose, with cars versus pedestrians, well, this is an out-of-town site, and it's a reality of these locations. I think, to me, the bigger issue is around pedestrians getting to the site or pedestrians moving around within the wider site. I can't imagine that there'd be a whole load of people getting to the site as pedestrians, but moving around it, yes. And as somebody who's used this, I would have said the bigger issues for moving around are actually not on this section at all, but on the existing bit, the north section and the west section. So the bit where you move around there, those road connections are poor, which is probably picked up on Councillor Pinnock's point about the fact that it was never really properly thought out in the first place. I take Councillor Major's and Councillor Thompson's concerns around that road. What I would probably say is this. I think the proposals that we've got for this site and the modest alterations to that short section of road might just help with moving around between those different branches. I can see the sense of putting the pedestrian crossing where it is, because that links up the west and the south more effectively. The existing crossings further down, I can only assume that they've just been put on because they're signalised junctions anyway. The bigger issue here, which is why I'm comfortable with this proposal, really, it's about the whole road layout coming through there. I would sincerely hope, if it's passed, that Highways will talk to ward members about how the pedestrian money is spent. But I actually think this is probably a case of a very busy, very important road that needs to be flagged up with WIMCA in terms of doing something probably a bit more substantial in terms of managing through flow of traffic and with those pedestrians. I don't know about a footbridge, an underpass or something, but that's not going to be within the scope of this, but it would be within the scope of a combined authority, I would have thought. So for me, I'm happy to do we have a proposal? I'm happy to second that.
Councillor Thompson.
One is made by one of the officers saying that the amount of additional traffic created by these two units wouldn't be substantial, but as I remember, over the last 3 units that have been built and are in operation in that unit, we had the same conversation, that each one of those didn't really create that much traffic to warrant any major changes. But you know, how long do we go on with different units until we do have a difference in a major difference in how much traffic is created and makes a difference? So that was one point. The next point is that as far as the highways are concerned, ward councillors have been in touch with highways for the last 2 or 3 years, reference to doing a complete survey on that stretch of road, and we've just been told recently that there's no resource to be able to forward that. So we've now got a major arterial road that runs through from the M62 to Huddersfield, and we have no resource, whether it be financial or manpower, to be able to do anything about it. But what we have got from the top of the map there, where the where Gelderd Road begins there, and for 3/4 of a mile in this plan we'd then have 5 sets of traffic lights, which I know, as far as environmental concerns are concerned, I can't believe that we're actually putting more traffic lights into a main arterial road instead of less, and thinking through how we can better the flow of traffic rather than restricting it even further. So I'll repeat myself from earlier. I have no objection to the site. What I have got an objection about is how highways have treated this stretch of road and actually holding up traffic. No forethought as far as allowing people to stay parked, because another comment was made about going from the north side of the site to the south side in a car. Well, that's not what we really want as far as environmental concerns are concerned. What we want to do is allow people to park and travel from north to south on foot without having to get in the car again and travel 1/4 mile to another car parking space and then travel through 2 or 3 sets of traffic lights to get out of the site itself. So to me, it's almost a perverse contradiction in everything that we stand for as far as Kirklees is concerned, not to mitigate traffic flow on those sites, and therefore I would say that this plan needs deferring until there's a better plan come from highways on allowing people to walk from north to south. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Chair. Just one other comment I wanted to make earlier and I forgot. I'm just looking at the comments from the police designing out crime officer, he or she advises that vehicle height restrictions should be provided to the car park. I'm just going to make a plea here for camper vans. I don't think it's taken up in terms of in the report or in terms of a condition, but you really, any store up on that site is really missing a trick. The number of camper vans that actually pass on the M62 on their way to and from different campsites either side of the country is amazing. If you actually sort of stood there and do a count, any time of the year almost, there would be loads. And unlike European or continental European supermarkets, where any camper van can always go in, get their shopping, get their petrol and drive out, you can never do it in England. I just put a plea for camper vanners in, please don't put any height restrictions on anywhere in this site if at all possible. Close them at night, that's fine, but not during the day.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. If Councillor Thompson moved deferral, I'd quite happily second that. Because my concern, to be honest, is regarding the highways as well. And I do think there will be a substantial increase in traffic. I mean, I'm not quite sure where the next nearest Lidl is or Home Bargains, but people drive to a supermarket. Nobody walks to a supermarket. For a kick-off, you've got to get your shopping home, however you look at it. And as we already know, the bus service up there isn't great. So there will be a big increase, and the thing is, you're not going to get somebody. Something really does need looking at, because I think, you know, if somebody's parked on that side, they've got the shopping, they'll put it in the car. Are they then really going to actually walk across and go somewhere else? I'm not 100% sure on whether they will, and especially across that road anyway, because I quite agree. I think you take a bit of a risk. I mean, I've tried crossing it, and yeah, it's not the best. And putting, you know, 5 sets of traffic lights, well, surely that is going to really slow traffic up. There isn't going to be a flow, because you can guarantee you'll get to one, it'll go to red, and then you'll get through that, and the next one will be at red. So he's, you know, that's just going to be honest, increase air pollution. It's bad enough as it is up there. I mean, if you come down the M62, they're queuing to get off it at that junction at 27. You're queuing to get on at junction 27. There's already these speed, whatever they call them, where they alter speed on motorway constantly and that bit. So yeah, I'd quite happily look at deferral, and let's come back with something that might work on the road. And I know it was an accidental retail park, and I believe probably Councillor Light was partly responsible for it in the beginning with Showcase, but yeah. So yeah, if, like I say, if Councillor Thompson's moved deferral, I'll second. Thank you.
Chair, last week I was on the Heavy Burden Planning Committee in Dewsbury, where one of the application came up. Network Rail, they propose to replace the level crossing with a footbridge over the 2 or 3 tracks going over, which the residents, most of the residents, strongly oppose the footbridge, claiming you are offering people to commit suicide on the footbridge, and that footbridge will create some antisocial behavior of people running around there. So, I mean, the footbridge, I don't think in these days it work very well. Only pedestrian crossing or other improved pedestrian crossing, and that will work. Mr. Chair, subject to, as Councillor Greaves' suggestion, highway officer work with the ward councillor how to spend this 160,000 to improve the those crossing around there. I would like to move officer recommendation to approve. Thank you. I think Councillor Charles has already.
Yeah, if it might close the gap a little bit. I'll just, in terms of applicant, highways and ward councillors working together, one thing that might work is trying to synchronise any new lights with the existing ones, so that it doesn't cause multiple stops. But I think I think from what Councillor Thompson said, perhaps what would help is just amending the terms of the Section 1 agreement as to the scope of what that £160,000 can be spent on. So if there's no objections from Highways to it, perhaps we should broaden that up so that there's actually some funding within that to pay for a proper review of this road and to allocate the office time to do that. So at the moment it just talks about an improvement scheme on the neighbouring retail park, signalised crossing, new and upgraded crossing points. So perhaps we could just expand that to incorporate a wider review of the road. And if Highways have no objection, or rather, actually, if Highways say that's doable, then I'll put that forward as an alternative proposal.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's just an important point for members to be aware of, that one of the tests for attaching Section 106 agreements is that it must be fairly related to the development, and I think what the committee could be in danger of is trying to attach more serious issues with the wider highway network that already exists to what is proposed by this proposal. Yes, you know, developments should mitigate their own impacts. That is a reasonable way to relate it, but what they can't do, and what I think is unreasonable, is to try and solve all the problems that are in that area, and I think we're getting into that territory, if I may say that, Chair. Yeah, that was all at the end of the day. Thank you, Chair.
I'm going to say, looking at it with hindsight, it would be a marvellous idea if there were a road from Wakefield Bradford Road up at Bruncliffe that came straight down into Showcase, and another road that came from Diglington coming out somewhere near IKEA, but we can't do it. So you're right, David, it would be nice to be able to do it, but we can't. One thing that I do think does need looking at, though, is that roundabout, because you gear yourself up, you're like Ayton Senna trying to get from one side to the other. That's how bad it is, because cars literally fly round that roundabout and you have a split second. I mean, it's very, very rare that I go up there. I certainly do not go at Christmas. You know, no way. But something does need doing.
Thank you, Chair. We've had a mover and a seconder for the officer's recommendation, the amended recommendation, because it doesn't have to be sent out to the Secretary of State now. In terms of the highways, what is proposed here within this application is what is considered by Highways of the Council to be the optimal solution, and wider issues relating to the highways are beyond the scope of this application. So the suggestions that we tinker with the highways solution, I think, are beyond the scope of this application. So I think the voting in terms of the mover and seconder is as is written now, and if a deferral is considered, I think we should take that afterwards, and I think we should think seriously about that, because that would involve wider highways implications beyond the scope of the application.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd just like briefly to focus on another part of the Section 106 agreement. You will notice that number 2 in the not number 2, the subsection 2, the travel plan monitoring fee of £10,000. Now, what I'd like to know is what is the intention of the travel plan? I know I mentioned things to do with buses and so on, but who is this travel plan for? Is it for the people who work there, or is it for people getting there in order to shop?
Through you, Chair. Yeah, I think with retail developments of this type, it's going to be primarily for staff, because it's difficult to influence how customers are going to use a facility like that. But with 75, 110 part-time or whatever it is, you can influence the way that they, because you don't want them driving there and taking up all the parking spaces for a start. But there will be. I haven't seen the travel plan, but when it's developed, it will involve measures to encourage them to use sustainable transport to get to and from work.
Right, try and make a bit of progress. The mover and seconder for the application as it is came in first before the mover and seconder for a deferral. So we'll take a vote on the application itself as it is now. So those in favour of the officers,
I'll go around the table. Yeah. Right.
you know, it's up to you whichever way you want to vote. But it's officers' recommendation first.
So I'm just confirming then. So we had Councillor Sokol who moved the recommendation, Councillor Greaves who seconded it, and it'll be as per the amended recommendation as outlined in the planning updates. That's what we're voting on. You don't have to touch your microphones when I go round, because Philip will do it for you. Start with Councillor Greaves.
For.
Councillor Bellamy.
Against.
Councillor Pinnock.
For.
Councillor Sokol.
For.
Councillor Patterson.
For.
Councillor Thompson.
Against.
Councillor Hall.
Against.
Okay, so that's 4 that voted for, 3 against, so officer recommendation has been approved.
Next item, page 37. This is one of our site visits this morning. New A Road, Huddersfield. Richard. Is Richard joining us via Teams?
He's doing it via Teams.
Yeah.
Can everyone hear me? Good afternoon. I'm the police officer for this application. The item before you today is a full planning application seeking the installation of an artificial sports pitch and the alterations to 4 other turfed pitches at the Lawnhill Community Club. The Community Club is a sports and activity complex accessed from New Hay Road. It consists of 7.3 hectares of sports grounds, grandstands, floodlights, access roads, a car park and a 2-storey stone-built clubhouse with changing rooms and gymnasium. The complex is bound by residential dwellings and Moorlands Primary School. The new owners of the site, Huddersfield Giants Community Trust, intend to operate training sessions on the site for their professional teams. The site is also used by amateur men's, women's and juniors rugby teams, as well as Huddersfield YMCA Football Club and a fitness gym business. The application site is designated as an urban green space, and there are many protected trees found in and around the site. 12 representations have been received in respect of the application. They detail the following matters: concerns relating to the development's impact upon trees and boundaries, concerns relating to the operating times of the proposed artificial lighting, premature commencement of development, and multiple concerns from residents of Hadrian's Close in respect of the proposed yellow lining. This slide presents the access into the site from New Hay Road. The applicant has offered to submit an application for a traffic regulation order under the Highways Act to install waiting time restrictions in the form of yellow lining to prevent parking within the visibility splay of the site's junction. Members may have noted that at paragraph 11.4, the officer report refers to the securing of a section 106 agreement for a traffic regulation order. This is an error. As set out elsewhere in the report, the TRO to stop intermittent parking at the entrance is not considered necessary to make the development acceptable and could not therefore be secured by means of a 106 legal agreement. It is for this reason that it is not in the recommendation, and the reference should have been omitted from the report. This slide provides a view of the existing car park and the plan presenting how it is to be formalised into a one-way system with marked bays. There will be provision for 111 cars and 3 coaches. The hard standing of the car park has been agreed between the local lead flood authority and the applicant to be composed of a permeable material so that surface water is able to dissipate to ground and not incur an increase in demand upon the public sewer infrastructure. Condition 4 of the officer recommendation requires submission and agreement on the permeable surface specification prior to commencement of the part of the proposed development which relates to the car park. For members' benefit following the site visit this morning, this slide presents images of the proposed artificial pitch location prior to commencement of the development. The top picture presents a view towards the clubhouse, whilst the bottom picture presents a view in the opposite direction toward Laund Road. This slide provides an overview of the alterations to the site. Members should note that this layout is somewhat out of date, given the updated arboricultural information cited in the committee update, as it does not reflect the uplift from 8 to 18 trees that are now proposed to be removed. The applicant has made the local planning authority aware that they intend to update the plans to reflect the tree removal, and the case officer has made the applicant aware that a decision notice cannot be issued until the tree removal information is accurately reflected on the submitted plans. Irrespective of this, this slide is accurate in presenting alterations to the way the site is used as an urban green space. The alterations to playing pitch provision on the site include a new under 18 pitch named Pitch 3A is to be created on an existing turfed area in the northwest corner of the site. The area has been used for sport activities in the past, but this application would formalise the use of this space. Pitch G, to the right of Pitch 3A, is to be enlarged and formalised for use by under 12s. Pitch 3, to the south of Pitch 3A, is an existing pitch, which is to be realigned to be parallel with the site's western border. The alteration requires resiting of this pitch's floodlighting to prevent a safety issue being incurred for those who play on the pitch. The artificial pitch is to be situated in the centre of the site at a length of 113 metres and at a width of 68 metres. The pitch is to benefit from 6 floodlights and will include shock pads to reduce impacts with the surface. The 3G pitch has been designed in accordance with consultation guidance from Sport England, the Rugby Football League, the Rugby Football Union and the Football Association. The indicative use of the pitch is by teams associated with Huddersfield Giants in the morning and for community uses in the afternoon, with some evening periods being allocated for training for local teams. In terms of planning policy and land use, this proposal represents replacement facilities which are acceptable under the local plan urban green space policy LP61, specifically clause B, which accords with National Planning Policy Framework paragraph 98. This is because the new artificial pitch is equivalent in quantity and better in quality terms relative to the existing grass pitches it replaces. Indeed, artificial pitches provide the opportunity for more intensive use than grass pitches and are available for dual use by both codes of rugby and by football. As a final point, Pitch A is to be realigned marginally south and west, but this is largely confined to within the sidelines surrounding the existing pitch. As regards the hours of use for the playing pitches and the operating times for the floodlights, environmental health officers have recommended outdoor hours of use being restricted in the evening between Monday and Friday up to 8 p.m. By contrast, the applicant has sought a 10 p.m. customer closure time. The case officer has attempted to be consistent and reasonable in the approach to customer operating times and floodlight operating times by providing a draft condition that elicits a 9 p.m. customer closure time with a further lighting condition that has an allowance for 15 minutes of floodlighting following the 9 p.m. closure time. As this specific condition has not been agreed, it is considered necessary for members to indicate as a part of their committee decision whether officers have consent to continue negotiations with the applicant in respect of condition 11 to come to an agreement on the operating time restrictions for the pitches and their floodlights. The plan on this final slide sets out the number of trees to be lost. If members can make out the yellow and red dots on the left and right of the plan, these indicate the trees to be removed and pruned respectively. As is evident when compared with the previous plan, the level of mature tree loss indicated in the latest arboricultural information indicates a 125% uplift in the number of trees originally needing to be felled to account for the development. This situation has resulted in an objection being lodged by KC Trees on account of the proposal having a significant impact on the protected tree groups, with a resultant negative impact on public amenity value. Likewise, insufficient detail on the location of replacement tree planting to offset this impact is yet to be received. The committee update reflects the potential for conditions 17 and 18 of the officer recommendation being able to reduce the impact on the proposed trees through a revised arboricultural method statement and through submission of full landscaping details to be agreed with the council prior to the protected trees removal. The applicant's arboricultural consultant has provided a response to the KC Trees objection, which substantiates their revised position. To conclude, the application is recommended to members for approval, subject to conditions as detailed in the officer report. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. First speaker is Richard Thewlis. Not here. Next then is Stephen Grayley.
Chair and committee, good afternoon and thank you for your time today. I'm here, my name is Stephen Grayley and I'm here in my capacity as Chairman of Laund Hill Community Club. I and my fellow directors are responsible under licence from the Huddersfield Giants Community Trust for the day-to-day operation of the complex formerly known as Huddersfield YMCA. When Mr Ken Davey bought the complex, he did so not only with the intention of turning it into a world-class training facility for the Huddersfield Giants, but also he wanted to create a facility that could be enjoyed by the community as a whole. My remit, therefore, is to open the site to accommodate as many community groups as we can. For example, we now have an active dementia group, Nordic walkers, a pre- and after-school club, and we were heavily involved in the Marcus Rashford School Meals Initiative. This is in addition to the 300 plus members we have who both train and play competitive junior and senior rugby and football on site. To achieve this and accommodate the Huddersfield Giants training schedule within the current playing resources is just not possible. Pitches get overplayed and the necessary maintenance cannot be carried out. There is therefore an urgent requirement to create additional playing areas, hence the need to build an artificial playing surface. It is of note that to prevent overuse of the existing facilities, it is the Giants who have found and are paying for off-site training facilities, thus allowing continued use of the site by the community sports teams. In addition, the Giants have invested in improvements for the football playing surfaces, all of which I believe demonstrates their desire to promote use of the complex by the wider community. The creation of an artificial playing surface will benefit not only the Giants and existing members of the community club, but it will also be available to any group who wishes to hire it. Not only will it be allowed for more sport to be played, but hopefully also provide a safe and secure space for groups needing such an area. It is anticipated that subject to receiving planning permission and the surface being taken into use, we will then be able to turn our attention to the wider site. For example, there has never been a tree management plan. We are now aware that there are a considerable number of trees that are diseased and require removal. Trees are overhanging the boundaries and impeding on neighbours' properties, and therefore we will need to formulate a comprehensive management plan to be submitted to the Council for its approval. Our long-term aim is to create a biodiverse environment around the complex that will both encourage children and parents alike to be stimulated to walk through. In summary, I would ask that this committee recognises the benefits that this planning application brings to both the town as a whole in boasting what will be a world-class rugby training facility, but also a multifaceted complex that can address the disparate needs of the local community. Thank you for your attention and I'm available to answer any questions that you may have.
Right, thanks Stephen, thank you. Right, members. I'll say one thing, as we noticed this morning when we went for a look, work had already started. Now, I'll just say to anybody, if you're thinking about doing something like this, for God's sake, ask first. And then you've got a plan, we all know what we're doing. Council will help you if you're not sure about anything like trees, etc. Yeah, that's the only annoying thing about it, this application, it started. Otherwise, I've got to say I'm very much in favour of it. Councillor Pinnock.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to consider the position of the trees. When I was on site this morning, I hadn't read what the arboricultural officer had to say, which is in the update. and it does suggest that there may be an accommodation with the views expressed by the arboricultural officer and the recommendation. I think he is implying that some work could be done to the trees that didn't involve actually felling them. I don't know, is he here? I just wonder whether it wouldn't be a bad idea to have an explanation as to where he's coming from on that point, please.
Nick, do you want to come in and comment, please?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Chair. Yeah, Councillor, it's where I was coming from on that was that the tree losses have included sort of trees that are on the other side of the track, slightly only just being impacted on by the groundworks, and now you actually thought some of them could be retained, pruning works could be scaled down, and it would have less of an impact. I do think there is some compromise to be had that would be acceptable there. Hope that helps.
All right, Andrew.
Yes, I think that can that be taken on board, please? Because I don't think any of us here want trees to be chopped down. We try and avoid it simply because even if they were to be replaced, the length of time it takes to replace the value of the tree being chopped down is actually quite long, and therefore doesn't really work. So even if it means deferring it to get this sorted out, I would like to, given what it is said in after the arboricultural officer's submission, I presume Richard Gilbert has written this, that the arboricultural method statement should be included in the conditions, so that a compromise can be arrived at to maximise the number of trees retained whilst giving permission for the development, which I think, actually we want to do both. Thank you.
Richard, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, so conditions 17 and 18, 17 relates to the arboricultural method statement, and 18 relates to the outstanding landscaping details, particularly tree planting. Councillor Pinnock is absolutely correct about the arboricultural method statement, and that is the mechanism through which officers intend to leverage justification for each tree to be removed, and hopefully a position would be able to, the compromise that Nick alluded to, be able to be reached so that we could retain more trees than has been indicated in this revised information. I think that summarises it. Obviously, there's still outstanding details in terms of the replacement trees as well, but both of those conditions would need agreeing as a part of a discharge of conditions application prior to the works to remove the protected trees. Thanks.
Thanks, Richard. Councillor Pattison.
Thank you. Yes, we were all concerned about the trees this morning, but I think I am assured by what Richard is saying about those conditions. I wouldn't particularly want to hold this development up, because I do know how well used and how well supported on the whole this whole sporting area is, and I would imagine also that there must be some urgency for the club to get on with this. I mean, just because of seasons and growing grass, etc. So, I mean, as long as those conditions do reflect our concerns about the additional loss of trees, then I'm willing to actually just approve this application. I'll move it, yeah.
Thanks. And there's one condition that does want sorting out, bios, is what time the floodlights are switched off. And I've got to say, it's going to have to pay for itself, is this. and switching off at 8 o'clock is not good business sense to me at all. So I would certainly put 9 o'clock on the table as a finishing time. Councillor Greaves and then Mohan.
Thanks, Chair. I'm happy to second this proposal. I think 9 o'clock is an appropriate time for light switch off. I'm happy to deal with the trees issues through conditions 17 and 18. I think it might just be worth stressing to the applicant, though, that means they can't do any work with those trees until it has been fully agreed with the trees and planning officers exactly what's going to be what and what's not, and that if they can't come to an agreement, they won't have planning consent to do anything. And bear in mind that they've already started, that's going to leave them in a right old pickle if they choose not to develop a tree proposal that can be acceptable to Kirklees trees officers. But I'm happy to second it.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions. One is, might be me, but I can't find anywhere if there's any additional light into what's already there. So that's a question that I'd like answering. And the other would be reference to enforcement, because part of the site's already been started, which beggars belief anyway. I'd just like to know what we've got to do about that as far as enforcement's concerned. But no objections, Chair, just 2 questions.
Mohan?
Yeah, I was just going through this report. First of all, I think on page 43 there is a minor mistake. Not minor, big mistake. It might be on typo. 10.4. Where is it on the 22nd October 2022? We haven't reached to October yet. He said on 22nd October 2022 Sports England issue a holding objection. I think need to correct that. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Chair, I remember, as I said on the site visit this morning, a few years back, there was an application on there about the pitch. The application, I think, I'm not quite sure, it was a refuse on the issue of loss of trees that time. I'm still concerned about the loss of trees, but as there is some proposal, we add some condition on that, get some compromise to retain as many as trees we can do. I'm happy to go along with members.
Richard, did you get that about the trees? In general, members are happy to go with this application.
Yeah, so I think there's multiple points, isn't there? I think there's operating hours, whether there's Councillor Thompson raised more lighting and enforcement from a commencement perspective, and then Councillor Sokol about the inaccuracy in the officer report in terms of the date. So I'll move over all those matters. So in terms of the hours of operation, as I've mentioned in the presentation, environmental health colleagues had suggested 8 p.m. And the Laund Hill Community Club and the Huddersfield Giants had suggested 10 p.m. Officers have taken effectively split the difference. The applicant has indicated that they have permission to operate the existing floodlights until 10 p.m. However, there is no planning permission on the land that indicates that such an operational time restriction has been granted in planning terms. This does not preclude other legislation. However, existing permissions on the site restrict floodlighting to operate at various times between 9 and 9:30 in the evening. The applicant further states that competitive games are held that can run later than 9:15 p.m. However, officer's opinion is that that matches could start earlier and be managed in a way that would comply with reasonable times that would protect the amenity of surrounding residents. In terms of whether there's more lighting raised by Councillor Thompson, yes, there is more lighting. So the artificial pitch will be creating 6 floodlights but these are further away from residential boundaries than existing lights that serve pitch 3. And there's a condition requiring further details on the horizontal and vertical lighting points and various ones that Mohammed, the environmental health officer, could extrapolate. In terms of enforcement, obviously it's not ideal that commencement has started. Not really any more comments on that. Obviously we would prefer that applicants gain permission first and discharge any relevant conditions, and as Councillor Sokal has stated, yes, it was incorrect. It's October 2021, not October 2022, because that's yet to come to pass.
Right, are we ready to go to a vote? Just reiterate, 9 o'clock, lights out. Right, it's been moved by Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Greaves, and we'll go to a vote. Richard.
Thank you. Right, so this is a vote for recommendation to approve as outlined in the report and update. So we go with Councillor Greaves.
For.
Councillor Bellamy.
For.
Councillor Pinnock.
For.
Councillor Sokol.
For.
Councillor Patterson.
For.
Councillor Thompson. For. Councillor Hall.
For.
That's unanimous. Officer recommendation has been approved.
Next application, page 53. This is Station Road, Mayfield, and it's Fazana. We'll have a 5-minute break if you want to stand outside and cool down a bit. Right, next item, page 53. This is Station Lane, Murfield, Station Road rather, and it's for Zana.
Thank you, Chair. The application is brought to committee as the site exceeds 0.5 of a hectare. The proposals are for the erection of an energy storage facility to be contained within a fenced compound with associated works. This slide shows the application red line. The proposed compound will be located within this section of the application red line. Sorry, Chair, it's frozen. Can't. This aerial view provides some context of the site. The area where the development is proposed is on vacant land northeast of Homebank Mills. This is Homebank Mills. So this is the access to the application site, which is here. Immediately to the south of the site lies a vacant field with River Calder beyond. To the north is the railway line, Huddersfield Railway Line, which runs from east to west with industrial and business uses beyond. Areas of hard standing within the site are stated to have previously been used in connection with the adjacent railway line. The site is currently served from an existing access track off Hearst Lane to the west here. The periphery of the site benefits from semi-mature vegetation and forms part of the wildlife habitat network, which is a strategic green infrastructure network along the River Calder corridor. Part of the existing access track lies within flood zones 2 and 3, along with a very small area in the northeast corner of the site, which lies in flood zone 2. A plan is provided later in the presentation showing these areas. The site is unallocated in the local plan. This slide shows photos of the gated access from Hearst Lanes. So the top photo shows the gate into the site. The second photo shows looking up Hearst Lane. You can see the viaduct there under the railway line. And this last photo shows looking down Hearst Lane towards the south. This plan shows the layout of the proposed compound, which will comprise of a substation, 18 high-efficiency battery storage units, 18 inverter units, and other associated infrastructure, along with 3 car park spaces for staff carrying out maintenance. Further details are set out in paragraph 3.2 of the agenda. The following elevation drawings show the heights of the substation. It's a little bit difficult to see from this, but the substation is shown as 5.75 metres high, and the heights of the units, which is 3 metres, along with the height of the fence, to be 3.5 metres in height. From this plan, you can see where the small areas of the existing access track and part of the proposed compound area that lie within flood zones that I referred to earlier. No development is proposed in these areas. So you can just see the northeast corner of the compound area in flood zone 2 and the access here in flood zones 2 and 3. The energy storage facility would avoid wastage of large volumes of energy. The storage units will support the national grid and provide electricity at times when demand rises above generation and absorb excess electricity when demand is below the level of generation. The principle of development is supported and would accord with local plan policy LP26, which supports low carbon energy proposals. In terms of design, this is typical of this type of use, and the location is considered appropriate adjacent to other industrial uses away from any noise-sensitive receptors. With respect to environmental considerations, the proposals would include enhancements with additional soft planting and other provisions for birds, bats and habitats for invertebrates. However, additional soft landscaping is also required along the southern boundary, not only to visually integrate the industrial fencing and structures into its context, but also to enhance the wildlife corridor. This matter can be addressed by conditions. With respect to flood zones, a sequential and exception test was provided at the request of officers. These have been accepted and subject to conditions, the proposals do not give rise to concerns in relation to flooding. The Environment Agency does not object. To conclude, the development would provide a useful facility for the storage of electricity at peak times, which would help manage demand on the national grid. It is considered that, subject to conditions, the proposals would have no significant detrimental impact on the area's local environment and can be accessed safely for maintenance purposes. DM highway officers do not object on highway safety grounds and no representations are received. Officers recommend approval for the application to be delegated back to officers in order to complete the list of conditions, including those contained within this report, and issuing the decision. Thank you, Chair.
One speaker, and it's Louise Leyland.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. I'm the planning agent for this application. The purpose of energy storage facilities such as this scheme is to improve the efficiency of energy generating infrastructure, including from fossil fuels and from renewable resources. This facility would store energy at times of overproduction and release it back to the grid when needed, ensuring that no energy is lost. This type of technology will reduce the need for new power stations and energy generating facilities in the future and will assist in securing the UK's own energy supply. This type of development is classed as low carbon and is an important part of the government's strategy for radically reducing carbon emissions and tackling climate change, which is one of the central themes of the NPPF. Kirklees' own local plan identifies the need to tackle climate change as one of the key issues facing the area and to deliver renewable and low carbon technology. Energy storage is an enabler to the deployment of renewable energy, which by its nature can be intermittent. The improvement in the efficiency of renewables is essential to decarbonising the grid and moving towards a net zero emissions energy system. The application site was formally used in conjunction with the adjacent railway line and is considered appropriate for this type of development. It is not covered by any landscape or heritage designations and is not within the green belt. Although the site is part of a wildlife habitat network, it has been identified as having low ecological value. A biodiversity management plan forms part of the proposals here, which demonstrates how biodiversity will be enhanced on site, resulting in an uplift over the existing situation, benefiting the habitat network. The site is already well screened from view in all directions by existing mature vegetation. Given the nature of the site and this screening, no unacceptable landscape and visual impacts would result, and no adverse impacts on local amenity are anticipated. There have been no objections from the public, and none of the statutory consultees have objected, subject to conditions. As per the officer's report, the principle of the development is acceptable in this location, and there are no technical or environmental impacts or other material considerations that suggest permission should be withheld. The proposals are in line with the development plan and the NPPF and will result in environmental benefits, both in terms of carbon reductions and biodiversity enhancement, and as such, this is a wholly sustainable development. I hope members will agree with the officer's recommendation and approve this application. Thank you very much.
Councillor Graves.
Thanks, Chair. Well, I kind of like the idea of this proposal, especially with where we're at currently in the world. But just a couple of points to pick up on. Under the consultation responses, we've got Network Rail comments awaited. We've got West Yorkshire Architectural Liaison Officer requesting further clarity of works. Now, I understand that's police. Have we spoken to Fire about if they've got any comments to make on this? And then the other one I suppose to talk to would be National Grid. This is new territory for me. I'm not sure whether there's other facilities like this or what the implications of it are. I don't know whether it's low fire risk or higher fire risk. It's unmanned. Does that present issues? So just be helpful to get some clarity around that.
I know there's plenty of water around it. 2 rivers. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. Similar question, because of the potential volatility on battery storage, I just wondered if all the options had been looked at as far as the volatility, the explosiveness, the hazard of batteries, and if there's anything in the location that it might be a danger to public. That'll be the industrial units over the railway line and any residential. Is it far enough away for any of those potential hazards? Thank you, Chair.
Fazana, can you come back on those?
Thank you, Chair. So the West Yorkshire Liaison Architectural Officer was consulted. There was no comments in relation to fire risk received. So in answer to that point, really, I'm not sure if the applicants have considered or under a separate remit planning the risks of fire safety and blasts and things like that.
Can you enlighten us, Louise?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, so fire risk is dealt with by under a separate remit, so outside of the planning arena. So these types of facilities are subject to a lot of sort of health and safety testing, and fire safety is one of the things that's considered. So there will be a fire safety management plan, but as I say, it's outside of the sort of planning arena.
Thank you, Chair. I would be curious to know, and I don't know about other members, but what is the capacity of these batteries? What in layperson's terms can they store if necessary? I mean, I suppose that gives us an idea of how big the risk might be. Although I do note that one of the statutory consultees is the Health and Safety Executive, and a rather strangely worded double negative. They do not advise against the granting of planning permission. Why on earth they can't put it straightforwardly? I don't know. But if the HSE says it's all right, then it's probably all right. But I would be curious to know what capacity this is. Oh, well, yes, but I don't think I understood that.
Thank you, Chair. So within the agenda, paragraph 3.5, it does indicate that the overall capacity of the energy storage facility would produce 40 or store 42 megawatts of energy on site for each individual unit. I'm not sure what that would hold. Just with regards to the comments for health and safety, executive comments, they were consulted primarily because of the chemical works on the opposite side of the railways line, so to the north of this site. That's why the health and safety were consulted, because of the close proximity.
Councillor Graves.
I was just wondering whether or not we need a condition in to reflect the fact that they need to have the supplementary approvals, and whether or not we also need a condition in about decommissioning all of this infrastructure at its end of life.
Through you, Chair, I missed the first condition.
So the applicant's agent indicated that some of those fire concerns would be covered by separate provisions. Do we need a condition in our planning approvals that covers the need for that, and so that the planning approval is conditional upon them securing those additional permissions? And the other condition is, do we require a decommission condition for if this when it reaches end of life or is redundant, so that it's removed, rather than... So we have this issue, I suppose, with old wind turbines, where once they reach the end of their life, if there's no financial benefit in renewing them, they can just rot in the countryside. So do we have a decommission condition?
Through you then, Chair. Yeah, I mean, on the first point, legal advice has always been that we shouldn't cross other different parts of legislation. So the consenting regimes for, licences and other kind of authorisation can't really be conditioned, and so I would advise against that. But in terms of decommissioning, Fazana will answer that one. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, a condition can be included for the decommissioning of the site and the infrastructure if it does become redundant. Thank you, Chair.
Does anybody want to move it? Councillor Patterson, are you moving it?
Yeah, yes, I'll move it.
Seconded, have we got a seconder? Councillor Greaves?
With the decommission condition added, I'd be happy to second it.
Is that all right, Fazana, adding that decommissioning condition?
Yes, through you, Chair. We can include an additional condition to those listed in the agenda for the decommissioning.
Louise, is there a way of decommissioning these, or do they need to be decommissioned, or is it just switch it off?
Yeah, so it's quite standard to have a decommissioning condition on, so that's fine, and everything would be removed and the site restored.
Yep.
Thank
Good
you.
enough. Right, Charles? Right, we'll go to a vote.
Thank you. So we're voting for the recommendation to approve as outlined in the report, to include the condition decommissioning. So if we start with you, Councillor Greaves, please.
For.
Councillor Bellamy.
For.
Councillor Pinnock.
For.
Councillor Sokol.
For.
Councillor Patterson.
For.
Councillor Thompson.
For.
Councillor Hall.
For.
Okay, so it's unanimous, so the officer recommendation has been approved.
Right. So, last item, I'm stepping out at chair. Councillor Patterson, come on down. Put heating back on for you, because I know one or two of you look a bit cold.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. Colin Harrison, Development Management. I'm the Case Officer application 2021-92486 for the erection of 5 buildings of a mixed educational, agriculture and community use for former Spenborough Waterworks treatment on Smithers Lane in Hetland White. The application site extends 0.7 hectares and compromises land to the western part of the former treatment works, which covers a wider 6.1 hectares. Ponderosa Zoo is to the south, there's a farm holding over to the west, and the remainder of the treatment plant is to the north. The site is accessed via a track from the north of off Smithers Lane. The application site is set within the allocated green belt, as well as within the Kirklees Wildlife Habitat Network and Strategic Green Infrastructure Network as set out in the Kirklees Local Plan. The waterworks infrastructure has since been demolished and removed from the site, and the resultant site has been partially landfilled and landscaped. The images on screen now show the evolution of the site. It is therefore considered that the site is a greenfield site as defined within the MPPF. This is due to the removal of the previous structures. Notwithstanding this, the land on which the buildings sit has never actually been developed upon anyhow, as the images on screen show. On screen now are just some photos of the site showing the buildings in situ. For the benefit of the members that weren't there earlier, in the top right is the security building. Top left shows the open-sided building and the educational facility. The open-sided building is also shown in the bottom left. You can just about make out the feed store as well beyond there, and the bottom right shows off the workshop use. On screen now is the proposed site plan and their uses again listed. None of these uses benefit from the exceptions set out in the MPPF and Kirklees Local Plan and therefore represent inappropriate development in the Greenbelt. Despite the applicant alleging that buildings 2 and 5 are an agricultural use, as per paragraph 10.4 of the report, neither use is determined as agriculture as per the definition set out in the Town and Country Planning Act, thus does not benefit from the exception for agriculture set out in paragraph 149 of the MPPF and Local Plan Policy LP54 either. The submitted elevations for the security building and open-sided agricultural building are on screen now. The security building provides sleeping accommodation along with 3 offices, 2 bathrooms and storage across 2 floors. The open-sided building has an alleged agricultural use, however at present there are vehicles parked within it. On screen now show the elevations for building 3, 4 and 5. As well as being inappropriate in the green belt, which is by definition harmful, the buildings themselves, through the spread out positions, form, scale and layout on prominent greenbelt land, would materially harm the openness of the greenbelt also. By virtue of their urban design and sprawling layout within the rural landscape, it is also considered that these buildings are unacceptable to the rural character with regard to visual amenity. Finally, the applicant has failed to demonstrate a biodiversity net gain as required by the Kirklees Local Plan Policy LP30 in Chapter 15 of the MPPF. Therefore, for the reasons set out in full at the start of the committee report, officers recommend the application is refused. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Colin. Right, we have 3 speakers here today. Chris Slavin is the first person to speak. Thank you.
Are we on? Yeah. I speak as a friend of Howard Cook's. A man I hold with the highest integrity. We've worked on many projects off-site from this one and delivered some fantastic results over the years. Now, Howard suffered a mental illness when he was 19 and has since spent a lot of time trying to redress that, having recovered, putting things right, and one of the things he wants to do on the Ponderosa site is to give back to the communities. I'll give opportunities to those disabled young people who are around there, who come onto sites, take work experience, learn how to regain self-pride, self-worth, and some feeling of having a worth in society, which is a very valuable resource given that there's very little around that anywhere else. Ponder also gives employment to 80 plus people of all different ranges of skills, ranging from vets to animal cleaners, of course, and my own daughter-in-law, who worked there many years ago and is now a serving police officer, as an example of what can be achieved through the variation of employment available there. In terms of education, the Ponderosa experience gives school trips, youth groups. There's currently a Grow, Cook and Eat project working there, and we've talked about people working with learning difficulties. The zoo itself is something which I think we all hold with a bit of pride. It is one of 2 zoos in West Yorkshire, the next one being in Leeds. It rates very highly on feedback on Google. It has the same status as Chester Zoo, so it's not a project that's to be taken lightly. This is a very serious concern, a very serious piece of work that's been developed and is continuing to be developed. And Howard, I know, has a heart of gold, and he just wants to see this work for the good of the people of Kirklees. The people who work there and earn money, of course, it goes from the butcher pays the baker, who pays the candlestick maker, and so the local economy benefits tremendously from this kind of scheme. It's 7 days, 24 hours in the zoo, and a great range of skills for people to learn things. And that's from me. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you. Our next speaker is Alistair Flatman, who I believe is the agent.
Thank you, Chair. Before I just start my 3 minutes, could I just mention the request to defer? I don't know whether that's formed part of the agenda. I know we communicated with Callum at the start of the week and put a formal request in to defer so we could address the ecology issue. Excuse me if I've got the process wrong. I don't know whether that will be mentioned once we've done our 3 minutes each, but I just wanted to make sure that had been picked up. Thank you.
Yes, it's been noted, and as part of the committee discussion, I'm sure they'll make reference to it.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, I'll start my 3 minutes. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the Planning Committee. My name's Alistair Flatman and I act as the agent for this application. The main issue with this application appears to revolve around very special circumstances, and I wish to work with the Council to find solutions to the issues arising. I note there's no consultee objections and any letters received have been supportive. The NPPF states that councils, local planning authorities should approach decisions on proposed developments in a positive and creative way and work proactively with the applicants. I think given the unique nature and offer of Ponderosa, this application is a good opportunity to take that proactive and creative approach to further enhance the positive contribution that Ponderosa makes to Kirklees. I note the assessment set out in the officer's report and particular comments made on appropriate development and greenbelt and definitions of agriculture. However, I do feel that the wider point here is that Ponderosa is a long-established centre which provides much needed specialist facilities to help support the education and mental health of adults and children. Assessment of the proposal should therefore focus on wider principles and benefits rather than a strict interpretation of greenbelt policy and definitions of agriculture. The site has a long planning history which, with the support of Kirklees Council, has enabled the site to develop into a successful community, education and tourism resource. The existing buildings were built in 2019. 2 are agricultural in appearance but currently used as workshops, as they have been during the COVID-19 pandemic, whilst the security building is required to provide 24/7 security on site, subject to antisocial behaviour, threatened break-ins and arson, etc. Whilst it's accepted that the buildings have been erected without the necessary approvals, the need to retain them is clear. The agricultural building is a simple open-sided structure, appropriately designed, and will be used to house animals on site as part of the expansion and enhancement of the farm operation. The buildings subject to this application, we do feel there is a need for all of them and that they do merit retention on the site. We do acknowledge the security building may not need to be located in this location, and we would consider a temporary consent so that we could find an alternative. We believe this is a well-established enterprise delivering a number of very positive economic and social community benefits. It's a facility that the council should be proud of, and whilst I agree it may not fit directly into definitions of appropriate development and agricultural, there are elements of it which do. So in my view, there are clear grounds for the council to take a pragmatic and supportive approach to this unique site and situation. As mentioned, this is an ideal location for such an enterprise, and we believe that the nature of the site, its uses and wider benefits amount cumulative to very special circumstances which weigh in favour of the proposal. As such, we believe there are reasonable planning grounds to support the proposal and respectfully request members grant retrospective planning permission for this scheme. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Flatman. And then finally, we have Adam Cook, who is speaking on behalf of the applicant.
Hello, my name's Adam Cook, who's Howard's son. Ponderosa has been, probably come more alive in the last two years to my life than any time. 2 years ago, Ponderosa's been going for, been coming to 30 years this year now. It has taken a bit of a different stance as my mum started this, and my dad, like I said, 30 years ago. My mum passed away 2 years ago, which now has been me and my brother very much involved in the scheme. My father's very poorly and got cancer, and now we're looking at moving forward. I'm here just to embrace to Count Kirklees that me and my brother are willing to take this forward, embrace it. What we do with people with learning disabilities is phenomenal, and I invite anybody in this room to come and have a look. I want to embrace this for the future. We want to move forward. COVID's not been easy. The educational side that we're trying to put across, I'm here now to try and move this in the right direction, keep it sustainable, keep it positive, and embrace what an asset we have in Kirklees that is self-funded by ourselves, not by grants or things. We put our own time and effort and money into this scheme. It's a shame we are surrounded by the Greenbelt. It's we try our best to keep it as clean and tidy as possible, and therefore I'm just wanting support really if we can move this forward, especially with the people with learning disabilities. Some of these people now have been on our site for 24 years, and I'd like you to meet them. It's a fantastic scheme. We want to move it forward, and we just want support in doing what we care about, and that's it for me.
Thank you, Mr. Cook. Okay, as Steve would say, over to you, members. Mohan.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Chair, the applicant has actually ignored the planning legislation or planning rules and built these 5 blocks on site without planning permission. But at the same time, I question officer why they did not take action to stop building these 5 blocks on this site, on this derelict site. Why they let them to complete the building, then they come for enforcement action. So it's a thing is both sides. But actually, when I went on this site visit on the coach, I found this site is a derelict site. Although it's in green belt, allocated in green belt, but it doesn't look like in the green belt. It's next to the water-based site as well. I found that the site is surrounded by large tree when you go right into there on your right side, large tree, tall tree. And I noticed the applicant has planted more new trees on the left-hand side, which I'm thinking, when the trees, those small trees will grow up, it will screen all this building on which 5 blocks the applicant has built. I found it very interesting, all the 5 blocks, which is educational facility and training facility, agriculture and other. It's something like the actually council needs the facility for the local community. Yeah. But only thing, what I say, I think applicant should have come to the applicant before he involved this situation. But to me, Chair, although the officers are not happy, officers work with the rule on their guidance, planning guidance, and are refusing this application. But what will happen if the application is refused? The applicant might go to appeal. It might take another year or 2 years. You don't know yet. So, who will lose the facility is the local community. I know the officers say building these 5 blocks is very harmful to the green belt. But community benefit, these 5 block offering, I think it will outweigh the green belt issue. So, Chair, I'm not in favor to officer recommendation to refuse this application, but at the same time, I'm happy to, if members think, I don't know what the members, committee members' views are, I will go along, I'll listen to them. If we don't approve it, I think it would be good for the community benefit to defer this application and officers sit down with the applicant to work out and bring this application to the next planning committee meeting. Thank you, that's my views.
Thank you, Mohan. Councillor Pinnock.
Thank you, Chair. I hear what is said about the community benefit that is considered for these buildings, which is fair enough, and I'm well aware of the good work that's been done by Ponderosa, which is the other side of this huge Leylandii hedge. But it seems to me this is no excuse for building something and then asking for planning permission. There is an established procedure for applying for planning permission, and generally speaking, people will apply for planning permission, and then when they get it, they'll start building, not the other way around. And to add to that, there is a huge, what I think is called a portal frame building erected on this site to the south of the existing dwellings, sorry, they're not dwellings, they're buildings. What this building is for, I can't imagine. I know that's not part of the application, but it's there, and I'm not aware that it has permission. So I certainly don't think that a deferral will help, because I think that this only postpones a decision on the matter. I do think that we need to make clear to people, everybody who applies for planning permission, that there is an established way of doing it. As I've said, you apply for it first, and then start work when you get permission. I mean, we've had one example today already of somebody who started work before getting permission, but they stopped. But so I would like to move officer's recommendation. I'm well aware of what is said about the community benefit of this site, but I think that we need to work with the applicant to try and sort out, well, A, why they've gone ahead and built these things without permission, and B, how we can get round that. But I don't see that deferring it will actually solve anything. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pinnock. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. Just listening to some of the comments reference to community benefit. I've got a couple of comments to make there. My friend and colleague used to be a bus driver and therefore was a community benefit. But if he didn't have a driving licence, then he wouldn't have been able to drive the bus to be a community benefit. And I think that any lack of community benefit here, if refused, is in the hands of the agent and the owners for flouting the rules, not strategic planning and this committee. And it's been built on Greenbelt. It hasn't got planning permission. And as far as I'm concerned, you know, those are the rules. Whether we have a lack of community benefit because of it, it's still breaking the rules. So I would, if Councillor Pinnock is moving to support refusal, then I would second that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Greaves.
Thank you, Chair. I have to agree with my fellow councillors and with officers. I think the community benefits of Ponderosa Zoo and the work that the Cook family have undertaken is without doubt. But this application relates to some neighbouring land, and it seeks to identify very special circumstances which would justify development of this site. And I don't see them. Aside from the deferral for the ecology report, fundamentally, I don't think they've met the threshold. And in terms of the operations that we saw today, I'm not sure how you'd describe those as agricultural or what agricultural use has taken place. And if officers have understood it correctly, a zoo does not form part of agricultural activity. So this very special circumstances test hasn't been met. I think everybody should know that if they press ahead with development without having consents in place, they do so at their own risk. And I can understand that this is going to present a lot of issues, but that's why we would encourage pre-application discussions and would encourage active engagement with officers. So I think for me, the answer here is refusal. And if the applicant's going to take it to the planning inspectorate to argue over very special circumstances, if the planning inspector backs them, I can live with that, but I don't see it myself. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any more. Oh, Mohan?
I think officer haven't replied to my comments about why the officer did not take action to stop this building going on at that time.
So through you, Chair, our enforcement officers are aware of the site. As some other councillors have alluded to, they are permitted to apply retrospectively. They have to have the fair chance to get permission, even if it's retrospective, so we can't just start taking action anyway if no application has been made. So given this site and the complexities in site history, our enforcement colleagues decided it was best to wait for the outcome of this decision first, to ultimately give the applicant a fair chance and then support their enforcement notice as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Yeah, Chair. I still believe, I think there are special circumstances. If this application go to appeal, I think this council, as a committee, will lose this appeal, and the applicant might win the appeal, and it will be a cost to the council, not to the officers, yeah? So I still believe, I don't know, somebody will second me, I move to defer this application. Thank you.
Is there any seconder for deferral? I'm afraid I see none, Mohan. Can I just say something about this issue of enforcement? I mean, I do notice from the application that there was a pre-application advice was sought in 2019 when the applicants were told then that it was very unlikely that they would get support for this development within the Greenbelt. And since then, there have been another 3 applications which the applicants have themselves withdrawn. I mean, on this occasion, the applicants have asked us to defer it. Well, unfortunately, it's not in their gift to us to defer. It is in their gift to us to withdraw it themselves. But it is up to us to, as a committee, to agree whether or not we defer. And I'm afraid you have moved that, but I do not see a seconder for that. So, unless, I don't know if the officers want to say any last word on that?
Chair, I'd just come back. You're absolutely right. In 2019, we did a pre-application with the applicant when I think there were 2 or 3 buildings on site at that point. There wasn't enough information in the application to say whether or not there were very special circumstances, so we gave the applicant advice what they would need to submit with the application, which obviously they have done a couple of times. I think it's got to the point now where it does need a decision. There's no benefit in deferring for the biodiversity issue because that's an insufficient information which could be addressed through the appeal process anyway. And I think it ultimately is a decision from members and it gives the applicant the opportunity to appeal. Thank you, Chair.
In which case I will put this application to the vote.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. So this is a vote to refuse the application as detailed in the report. So start please with Councillor Greaves.
For refusal.
Councillor Bellamy.
For.
Councillor Pinnock.
For.
Councillor Sokol.
Against.
Okay. Councillor Thompson.
For.
Councillor Patterson.
For.
So the application is refused.
Right, thank you everybody. That is the end of the meeting. Thank you.